Hi, and welcome back to Buff's Vintage Bikes. First off, a big shout out to all the new subscribers. I'm guessing YouTube changed some algorithm because suddenly I'm seeing subscribers daily. So welcome on board. In this video I'm going to take you through the restoration of this Peugeot Rapport. The Peugeot Rapport fell towards the bottom end of the spectrum when it came to bikes, in the Peugeot range anyway. The frames weren't built out of the best tubing, often at Carbolite 101 I think it was, and then the components on the bike were very often bottom of the range Suntour components. This particular bike is running Shimano Sport LX groupset, which is also not totally uncommon because that's how the factory basically operated if they ran out of stock. So if no more Suntour components were available, they would just put whatever Shimano they currently had on the shelf on. And that was due to stock levels being a problem with the importing and exporting of South Africa at the time, as we had sanctions imposed against us. The brake calipers, I'm not too sure what they are. I'm assuming they're Weinmann because that is the brake levers on the bike. They're actually not stamped with a name at all other than patented on the back. And as you can see, this frame has seen some neglect over the years. A Rapport was the first bike I bought for myself when I got into the sport of cycling. Bought for the pricely sum of 650 Rand back in 1989 from Pollock Sports in East London. Its name is derived from the Rapport Tour, a 14-day stage race which used to take place over South Africa. Hugely popular at the time, the biggest stage race in South Africa, but sadly lost over the years due to issues finding sponsors. Okay, so I'm checking out the frame alignment on this frame because when I rode it initially it didn't feel, something felt odd on the bike, but I wasn't quite sure what. And only now after pulling it apart I can actually see that there's alignment issues on this bike. So I've strung a piece of string across the headset and I've brought it around and I've strung it through the stays at the back here, looped it in the middle. And then what you want to check is the two distances of the string from the seat post, the seat tube, sorry. So I want to measure this distance over here, just over 3 mils, 30 mils, so 31, and then on this side I want to measure it as well. Okay, apologies for the light. And here we're looking at closer to 39 mils. So the alignment is definitely out on this frame to this side. So this stay needs to be brought in slightly, and then this stay probably brought out slightly. Because if I measure this distance, I'm expecting this to be 26 mils, 126. Getting my numbers all confused here today. And it is roughly, maybe a bit more, 127. So it's close. So yeah, I'm going to be using a big plank of wood and I'm going to try and straighten this. Okay, so this is how we're going to try and straighten this frame. I've got the frame lying down. It's going to be resprayed so it's not on a soft surface. I'm going to strip it. So I've got two planks underneath here, underneath the seat tube, just to give me leverage on the big plank. I've got the big plank underneath the stays, and then I've got a bit of leverage on the big plank. And I'm going to apply pressure at this point. And what it's going to do is it's going to bend the seat stays and the chain stays slightly up. I've already done a little bit of work on it. I've got it almost spot on as it is. I need to move each of these stays out by 3 millimeters. So I'm going to apply even pressure in turns on each one until I get the right measurement that I'm after. Supporting the frame. If you need more leverage, you can push this out a little bit. Yeah. Turn the frame over, and I'm going to do the same thing on this side. So now when I measure my axle spacing on the rear, I'm wanting it at 126 and I'm basically at 125, which is adequate for what I'm after. 1 mil is not going to make a big difference. And then if I measure on my frame, my distance is here. I'm looking at 34 mils on that side and 34 mils on that side. So I'm basically pretty happy that I've got this frame a lot straighter. I'm now going to test it with the alignment gauge. This is the alignment gauge that I made off of the plans that RJ, the bike guy, had on YouTube. Thank you, RJ, appreciate it. Basically just a longer plank with a pivot point and a little gauge on the end, and then you can move these pivot points in and out, literally in and out. Check RJ's YouTube video out for instructions how to make this. So essentially what you do is you hold the longer plank against your seat tube and your head tube. They must be touching. You move your gauge down to the end of your seat stay, and you want that point just touching on the frame. And you can do it by just swiveling this in and out, and then holding it in this position, making sure everything is level. You then flip it over, and you want that same distance to be touching on the opposite seat stay as well. Then you know your frame is aligned. So I've now flipped the gauge over, and as you can see, it's just touching on the frame, meaning that both sides are equally aligned. This is a quick look at the frame after I got it back from aluminium blasting. It's given this very sort of titanium look. Should be a good surface to spray primer straight onto. You can almost see it's got a bit of a speckle in it. Excuse the weeds in the paving, it's winter in the Cape at the moment. So yeah, I'm going to clean it up with a bit of alcohol and then lay some primer onto it. I'm just busy going through the frame now, and I'm looking at some really minor imperfections. So I might have a slight little rise in the metal over here. This is after the blasting. So I'm using a jeweler's file, and I'll spend a little bit of time and just fleck this little spot down and then rub it with some water paper, probably about a 320, before actually putting the primer on. So I'm going through the whole frame and I'm looking for little marks like this that'll just affect the final paint job and cleaning them up. Certainly not the most refined bicycle frame I've worked on in a while. Note the differences between these seat stays. I'm guessing this must have been a late Friday afternoon job before knockoff. Between this video and the previous one, I've bought myself a little vinyl cutter. So I've been having great fun designing decals and masking decals as well to spray on the frame. So this was going to be my first attempt at masking. Normally I would just put a decal in that I either purchased or had someone make up custom for the bikes. So I was apprehensive but excited at the same time. So going through the steps now of just putting the masking on. In this instance I was going to shoot black paint onto the decals. So instead of using a direct masking, I was using a negative mask because I didn't want to shoot the white over the black because I was scared the black would obviously show through. The mistake I made here was to use a standard vinyl, not realizing that you actually get a special decal vinyl which is less sticky. So this was mistake number 2. The standard vinyl left a sticky residue on the frame which is virtually impossible to get rid of. Whatever product you're going to use to get rid of it is going to affect your spray job. See that sticky residue it's leaving behind? That shouldn't be doing that. And now when I actually touch it, I can actually feel the stickiness on it. And that is very bad for the clear cut. So my first attempt at spray masking has turned out somewhat of a flop. This is sticker residue here. There's a patch I missed. I missed that patch masking. I missed that patch masking. Don't even ask how, because I thought I had masked it very well. But clearly, paint gets through places where you don't think. And then this sticker residue from the vinyl, if I try and remove that, the chances are I'm going to end up removing the spray that I've got on here. So there I've missed as well. So yes, I'm going to be taking this off and shooting white onto this frame again. All part of the learning process. Fun and games. It's never as easy as the YouTube videos say it is. While on the error list, see these marks in the paint here? That is where I used material to mask off the frame. But this paint wasn't 100% dry. Even though the drying time was 48 hours and I left it longer than that, it still wasn't properly dry. Although it felt dry to the touch. So I think lessons learned before I take this back down. is that don't use enamel paints. It takes too long to dry. The white was an enamel, as was the black. You know, some people might find this acceptable. I don't. It's far from the quality that I want out of the work that I produce. So I'm going to flat this all back down and we'll start over again. So in part 2 of this video coming up, I'll show you the fix on the frame. Hopefully we can get it right, and then I'll take you through the part cleanup and putting this Peugeot Rapport back together again. So hit that subscribe button, please hit the like button as well, it means a lot, and I'll see you in the next video.